If you're familiar with my channel, I give a lot of hot takes when it comes to Souls PvP and Elden Ring. I'm always telling people how I think they should engage with the series, or how they should appreciate invasions. As I'm approaching my 1-year YouTube-versary, I want to cement those takes with something a little more conventional. I get comments on practically every video I make from people who want to try invasions or gain some insight into the system, usually asking for help or saying there's a lack of content for people who aren't already well ingrained into the series. So that's what this video is going to be, my overview and basic advice for anyone trying to get into invasions, especially for the first time. It won't be comprehensive, but it will ideally give someone struggling at least some insight into invasions. And while this topic is going to be focused on invaders specifically, some of what I'm saying applies to hosts or cooperators as well. First off, you should make a character dedicated to invasions. You can invade with your regular playthrough character, of course, but without understanding the system, you'll likely have missed out on a lot of potential optimizations or be in an unfavorable level range and end up making things harder for yourself. Just make a new character with invasions as the goal. When you're making your invader, one of the first things you should understand is the matchmaking formula. As an invader, you can invade 20 levels above you plus 10% of your level, or below you minus 10% of your level. So at level 100, you'd be able to invade players up to level 130 and down to level 90, meaning you'll be fighting players at a higher level than your own the majority of the time. And it's important to remember that this range is determined by you and the host, not their cooperators. Also, when invading, you can only invade cooperating hosts by default. Only a host using the Taunter's Tongue can be invaded solo, meaning you should expect to be outnumbered at all times. As far as cooperators go, the matchmaking formula allows a host to summon cooperators within 10 levels plus or minus 10% of their level. So if you're level 100 invading a host at level 130, they might have a level 153 cooperator before password downscaling would even apply, putting you at a serious disadvantage. And speaking of downscaling with passwords, the formula is not fully understood, but in my experience it is more aggressive the farther out of range the host and summon are, along with being less impactful at higher levels overall. So cooperators at closer level ranges may see little to no negative effects and retain much of their even greater level disparity. All of this sets the stage for what an invasion is. A fight where you are outnumbered and outleveled. You need to use your wits to win these fights, as trying to take on 2 or 3 players at once can be all but impossible. The next factor of matchmaking to understand is weapon level. You are matched both by your character level as well as the highest upgrade of a weapon you have obtained. If you've ever maxed out a weapon to either plus 25 for regular or plus 10 for somber, your weapon level for matchmaking is considered maxed out, regardless of the weapon you are currently using. It doesn't matter whether or not you still have the maxed out weapon, or if it's in your item storage, the system will always count the highest ever upgrade, so there's no going back. This also means that picking up higher level weapons like Roger's Rapier at plus 8, Edgar's Banished Knight Halberd at plus 8, or Patch's Spear at plus 7 all affect your weapon matchmaking, even though you didn't upgrade them. Be wary of these NPCs if you're intending to invade at a lower upgrade. The formula for matchmaking with weapons is a little more complicated because it's based on arbitrary brackets and has 2 different types of upgrades to measure. Regular weapons upgraded with smithing stones, and somber weapons upgraded with somber smithing stones. Regular weapons go up to plus 25, while somber weapons go to plus 10. A somber weapon's value is weighted to a regular weapon by being multiplied by 2.5 rounded down, meaning a plus 2 somber weapon is equal to a plus 5 regular, and a plus 5 somber weapon is equal to a plus 12 regular. All of these values can be found on the various wikis if you're confused, but the main takeaway is that both your character level and weapon upgrade matter for matchmaking. With that said, one of the hardest things to determine is how to pair the two. What upgrade should your weapon be at a given level? Well, this is where the freeform nature of invasions gets into the weeds. Your range for weapon matchmaking is the same whether you're invading or cooperating, so there's no presumption of a disadvantage. That being the case, you will still be invading players higher level than your own and need to factor in what level their weapons will be. This is all really annoying guesswork when it comes down to it in Elden Ring, as there's no set path for when players will get certain upgrades or levels. Anyone can go anywhere and progress in whatever order they wish, so it's a complete gamble. Some players will be very high level with relatively low weapon upgrades because they spend most of their time farming runes. A lot of veteran players might have the opposite problem, where they know how to quickly upgrade their weapons but don't need a lot of levels for their build. When invading, you should be aiming at the most general version of these two factors. For an example, let's use invading in Limgrave. Any character playing in Limgrave will be at least level 1, as that's the lowest possible level. If I understand the rounding correctly, level 1 can only be invaded by another level 1 character, as minus 10% of level 2 would be 1.9, rounding up to 2. So if you wanted to be able to invade absolutely any starting class right away, you would need to be level 1. Someone can double check me on that in the comments. But being level 1 is largely unnecessary. The only class that starts at level 1 is the Wretch. They have minimal equipment and aren't an ideal stat distribution for most builds, so we can assume they make up maybe 10% of the total player choices, given there are 10 starting classes and they have a similar number of benefits and drawbacks. The next lowest starting class is the Bandit at level 5, and the highest level is the Confessor at level 10. Vagabond is almost always the most efficient starting class for final stat distribution and starts at level 9, and kids these days love katanas, so the Samurai is popular and also starts at level 9. And we need to consider that characters have a few opportunities to gain runes and level up before they engage in multiplayer. So unless someone is jumping right into multiplayer with no setup, they'll probably be at least level 10. So if we wanted to invade someone as early as possible, say a starting Vagabond or Samurai, we could make a level 10 character. That'd let us invade anyone level 9 up to level 31, a pretty good range for Limgrave matchmaking. As far as weapon level, a plus 3 regular weapon can match down to plus 0 and up to plus 6. Somber weapons of plus 1 count only as plus 2 because 2.5 rounds down, but since plus 3 matches with plus 0, there's no reason to stop at plus 2 unless you want to remove options at the higher end. You can go higher level with your weapon, say plus 5 regular and plus 2 somber if you want to get more damage in, but that assumes your target will have leveled up a weapon, which I have found to be less common. Normally, upgrading would be done at the Round Table Hold, which is accessed only after defeating Margit or entering a later game zone like Caelid, so many players in Limgrave won't have done so. It is possible to upgrade weapons at the anvil next to Kale, but I feel most players forget that thing exists. So we have a template for a low-level invader at level 10 and weapon upgrade plus 3 plus 1. That'd get you a lot of invasions in the early game and is pretty good for activity. But at level 10, you have very few build options. Your best option would generally be to start as a Wretch and put your levels into Vigor for as much health as possible. If you wanted to have a more fleshed out build, you can go up by intervals of 5 until you have the build you need. Now, I'm not 100% on the rounding formula, so someone can correct me if this is wrong, but I believe at odd intervals of 5, like 15, 25, and so on, your range is rounded more favorably. 24 can only go 2 levels lower, but 25 can go 3. Meaning either could invade 22, and you'd have no reason to stay at 24. This may or may not be accurate, as it will depend on how the rounding is applied, but it's a trend I've noticed for Elden Ring builds, and one I've followed without issue. Still, take it with a grain of salt. So if you're trying to invade in Limgrave, I'd recommend between levels 10 and 30, with 15 to 25 as a sweet spot, and sticking to plus 3 plus 1 for upgrades regardless. You can get matches outside of that range, absolutely, but it can take a lot longer to find them. For higher level brackets, you'll want to try invading with a lower weapon upgrade first and see how activity and balance is. A basic guideline is to take your level and subtract 10, then divide by 10 and use that for the somber limit. Level 60 builds would be plus 12 regular or plus 5 somber, because 60 minus 10 is 50, then divided by 10 gives you 5. A plus 5 somber weapon multiplied by 2.5 gives us 12.5 regular and rounds down to plus 12. You may also find success going up or down a tier, using plus 10 plus 4 or even plus 15 plus 6. Like I said, there's no certainty as it's a variable depending on the host, but when in doubt, try a lower upgrade first. This all brings us to another point: what level range you want to invade. I consider there to be 4 main ranges for invasions: low level, mid level, meta level, and high level. By my loose definition, low level invasions are anywhere from level 1 through level 40, mid level invasions are somewhere from 40 to 80, meta level invasions are primarily 125 to 150, and high level invasions are anything above that, usually 200 plus. Low-level invasions are a lot more favorable to the invader, and are great for beginners and veterans alike. This is because a competent invader will have an optimized build, whereas the host will likely be in progress and thus far less optimized. Understand, when I say favorable, I don't necessarily mean easy. You're using your optimized build to face off against multiple allied opponents, essentially leveling the playing field. If they're decent players or have complementary builds, or if they're just using overleveled phantoms, you're going to have to work for a win. Remember, invading starting class characters at the first step while they're fighting the Tree Sentinel hardly qualifies as an invasion. It's funny, sure, but it's a best case scenario in terms of difficulty. What you need to prepare for is the worst case scenario: a host with twice as many flasks as you, running a fully optimized build with 2 cooperators playing at the farthest end of the matchmaking range, or taking advantage of downscaling to pummel you into the ground and taunt your stupid corpse. You do not control who you invade, and someone looking for invasions is more likely to find them than someone who isn't. At low levels, damage thresholds are lower and your flasks are worth more, as they heal a flat amount. That means you can take more hits at low level and have a much higher chance at survival. That's maybe the most important factor when invading, making sure you can take multiple hits. It'll happen to you constantly. You'll get hit once by one player and stagger, then a second player will hit you before you can roll, and immediately the first player will hit you again. If you can't survive 3 hits, you'll find invasions very frustrating. This multiple hit issue compounds and ignores every other part of balance in PvP. Status effects build faster, combos that wouldn't exist suddenly do, and your ability to counterplay narrows considerably. And there will be cases where you can't take 3 hits. Once you get into the mid-level or higher, damage starts to outpace your reduction and healing. But rest assured, this doesn't make invasions impossible. The answer is to simply not fight 3 guys, or even 2 guys if you can help it. As an invader, you have the whole of the level and every enemy within to give you opportunities to divide and conquer. A tactical retreat will be of frequent use in a successful invasion, and luring players into traps by way of enemies or environment is all but required for the average invader to claim victory. It's no more cowardly to rely on these assets than it is for the host to rely on their cooperators. This is how the mechanic is designed to function and is essential to reliable, consistent success. Invasions are not built to support honorable duels between willing participants. They're an ambush of hit-and-run guerrilla tactics. And taking advantage of these scenarios with your build is a great way to optimize your invasions. Throwing big pots at a party near a ledge can clinch victory in an instant. Baiting aggression from overconfident groups into powerful enemies and then piling on with your own high-damage Ash of War is the bread and butter of a winning invasion. Fighting a host who's 20 levels higher and has double your flasks and is fully optimized and is standing by a grace pretending to have honor is not an invasion. Real invasions happen in the thick of the level, where chaos takes the world. Fairness is an illusion. Real invasions are not meant to be fair, and you need to use what you have available to win. Big surprise. But I want to dispel the myth that you need to be particularly good at the game to succeed at invasions. It's true that the better you are at the game, the better you'll generally perform, but so much of what defines your success is going in prepared and knowing what to expect. I'm not especially good at these games. I do alright, don't get me wrong, but I don't participate in tournaments or duels. I just invade with moderate frequency, with characters I'm comfortable playing in a level range that works for me. If I can do it, I'm confident anyone can. If you've followed along so far and are getting matches in a bracket you like, but are still struggling, here's my general advice for some specific pitfalls. Level Vigor. It should be obvious to pretty much everyone by now, but until you're at the 60 soft cap, you need to prioritize health. It's your mistake bar that determines how many mistakes you can make, and you are going to make mistakes. Make it as large as you can, and you'll have a much better time. Speaking of health, having maxed out flasks is not strictly necessary, but is a great asset not to be overlooked. If you're dying because you're running out of heals, you should bring more heals. And you should bring at least one cerulean flask, meaning allocating 2 at a grace so when it gets halved during the invasion, you still have 1 remaining. Every time you kill a player, they refill 1 use of each flask, so if you don't have a blue to refill, you're missing out on half of your replenishment. Remember that your FP is a vital resource that you should be leveraging in your invasions regardless of build. And regarding healing, learn to identify windows for healing and know how much health you need to engage with your enemy. Knowing when to punish a heal is essential in PvP, so you're doing the same thing in reverse when you need to heal by avoiding those punish windows. You're generally much better off to escape than to try and sneak in a heal while in enemy range. And when you're topping off to get back into the fight, recognize how much damage you take when trading and how much health you need to avoid dying to an unexpected combo. Don't be afraid to double dip for full health if the alternative is going in at 2/3 HP and getting effectively one-shot. Dying with flasks remaining means mistakes were made. Another resource is your Flask of Wondrous Physic. You don't get a refill on this one, so you need to pick your deployment carefully. That said, if your flask is essential to your build, you probably want to use it right before jumping into the fray. And some flask tier options are better than others when it comes to PvP. You know the bubble every overleveled phantom seems to run? The one that pops after a single hit? Yeah, don't use that. Good choices for any build are the Crimson Burst Crystal tier for passive healing, the Opaline Hard tier for damage reduction, and the Crimson Bubble tier for cheating death. Really anything that gives you a passive benefit for a few minutes so that it lasts you throughout the invasion. Just make sure to check whether or not your buffs stack with each other. Which brings me to my next point, item use. This may sound strange coming from a vegan, but you need to eat boiled crab. Eat it all the time to protect yourself. It's basically free damage reduction that stacks with most other buffs. Do not forget your crab. Similarly, weapon buffs are free damage. If you can buff your weapon, you should do so. You can always farm more materials or reload your save if you're worried about running out. There are also a ton of Ashes of War that will buff weapons and keep your supply use down, so try some of those if you hate farming. Also, throwing knives of most varieties are useful. They don't do good damage, but they are invaluable when it comes to finishing off low health targets or antagonizing passive players. Likewise, ballistas and great bows can be used to harass groups from far away. Other good throwables are anything that hits in an area, like the hefty pots of the DLC. I like to use volcano pots because they last a few seconds and give me control of the immediate vicinity. Cooperators want to stay together, and big explosions or rapidly ticking area damage can split them up, giving you the opportunity to do what you need to do. Item organization can also save you when you're in the chaos of battle. Sort your quick items according to your attack strategies so that you can switch easily. And if you weren't aware, you can hold up or down on the D-pad to auto-navigate to your first slot of your spells or quick items. And I'd personally recommend having your flasks all on pouches for consistent access. You want to avoid having to thumb through a bunch of items and miss your window. I'm bad about this and leave my healing flask in my main quick item slot, but I do keep my FP flask in my top D-pad pouch slot so I can use it instantly. I should move my healing flask to a pouch slot, or at least switch it with my FP flask, but I'm stuck in my ways. Find whatever way works best for you. Other good pouch slots are your crab, which you will use regularly, and maybe your physic if you don't need something else in that slot. You have 6 pouch slots and only 4 that have quick access, so use the other 2 for things you use regularly but don't need in an instant. How you use pouch slots is hardly universal, so just play around with them and see what feels right. And if you're into getting good, you'll want to get familiar with the inventory menus. If you can get to an item or piece of gear quickly through standard menu navigation, you'll find a whole world of gameplay opens up to you. You can even organize inventories by weight for easier switching. This is where hard swapping comes in, but that's a little more advanced and can be learned after you establish your fundamentals. Remember that you don't need to be a PvP god to get a win, you just need to know how to invade. Which brings me to my last point. Invasions are a combination of everything we've talked about, but something that is all too often overlooked by eager young invaders is patience. You need to be patient when invading. That doesn't mean taking it easy or going slow, it means not beelining toward a group and getting smacked down. If you run into a superior force, you will lose. Instead, let them come to you. Let them make mistakes. Invading is implemented in Elden Ring as a counter to cooperation. You're only expected to be as good as a single cooperator, so you need to play smart if you want to take down an entire team. Remember, your only job is to get them killed. Their job is to handle you and the level. If they want to avoid engaging with the level and try to wait you out, you can always wait them out longer. Or you can antagonize them. Or you can leave. But if you run in and play their game, you'll lose. And losing is okay. It's a great learning tool, and learning how to accept losing is critical to your appreciation of invasions. One of the best things about Souls games is how they force you to lose and learn, to rethink your approach. Invasions are just the ultimate form of that process. If you're losing all the time, that means you need to change up your approach. Maybe try a different level bracket or adjust your build. Certain tactics will work better at certain times. It's all about context and adapting and knowing when to do what. Elden Ring is a hard game to invade. While exceptions exist, the odds are really not in your favor, even at the most extreme. It's a game built to accommodate the host, with every design choice centered around shaping and supporting their experience. Don't take it too personally when you get decimated playing a tertiary role in a game that couldn't be bothered to include covenants or a 6-player limit. It's all just for fun, and you get out what you put in. If you're not having fun, I'd suggest reflecting on why. If it's just that invasions are too uphill for your liking, you could play a more optimized build or balanced bracket, or you could try invading in another game like Dark Souls 3. Elden Ring is hardly the end-all of the Souls experience, and doesn't exactly represent invasions at their best. Still, there's fun to be had invading, and hopefully this video has given you at least a little bit of insight into how to have that fun. I know I didn't touch on builds at all, but that's a very specific topic that comes down to personal preference. If that's something you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments. For now, the only universal truth is that you need as much health as you can possibly have. You can never have too much health as an invader in Elden Ring. Level Vigor. And if you're a seasoned invader watching, I'd love to hear your advice for newcomers in the comments. Please post your builds, levels, and upgrades for anyone looking for inspiration or some further guidance, as I'd love for this to be a community resource. I'm but one red among millions, and more voices strengthens the whole. Invader together strong. Like the video if you think it's helpful, maybe consider sharing this video with people who are trying to get into the sport, and subscribe if you want to see more of my invasion advice and analysis. Until next time, thank you for watching.